For these past several weeks since Easter Sunday, as we have been gathering for our Sunday and our weekday liturgies, we have been rejoicing in the midst of these Easter mysteries and the newness of life that we receive through Christ's victory on the cross. And we are invited to live in that joy, in that newness of life, and in the peace that comes through the resurrection. And as we gather this evening on this fourth Sunday of our Easter journey, we celebrate what the Church calls as Good Shepherd Sunday, as we do each year on this fourth Sunday. And it is because each year on this fourth Sunday of Easter, we read a part of the 10th chapter of St. John's Gospel, where Jesus identifies himself as being the Good Shepherd, and how he knows each of his sheep by name, and how these sheep hear his voice and they follow him. And because of that, Jesus says that they will have life and life in abundance. When we read through both the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see that this imagery of a shepherd and sheep is one that is frequently used to depict the relationship between God and his people. And certainly in our psalm today, Psalm 23, is perhaps one of the best known images of the Good Shepherd, both by believers and non-believers, where we hear in very poetic form of how God desires to be the shepherd of his people, to be able to lead them to fresh and green pastures, to be able to give to them repose. And we know that so often in the midst of our lives, especially when we are walking through dark valleys, when life becomes difficult and burdensome, this image of Jesus being our good shepherd and leading us to fresh and green pastures to give us repose can bring us great comfort and consolation. Oftentimes, when I am reminded of this 23rd Psalm, I recall a story that I heard several years ago. There happened to be a parish that was hosting a fundraising gala, and they invited a great Shakespearean orator to entertain the parishioners during the evening. Throughout the evening, the Shakespearean orator would recite various passages that he had performed on the big stage, and the crowd was wowed by his performance. And at the end of the evening, he said that he would do one final encore, and that it could be from anything that someone wanted to hear him recite. There was an older, feeble priest at the back of the room, and he put up his hand and he asked, "Could you recite the 23rd Psalm?" The Shakespearean orator paused for a moment, and he said, "I will, Father, on one condition. After I recite the psalm, would you come up and do so?" Though he was shy and timid, the old pastor consented because he wanted to hear the actor read the psalm. The Shakespearean orator magnificently went through the 23rd Psalm, word by word. And at the end of the psalm, everyone in the crowd was standing, applauding him. Then the Shakespearean actor invited the priest to come forward. Slowly, he made his way to the stage, and then in a very gentle and humble voice, he began to recite the words to the psalm. And by the time he finished, there was dead silence in the crowd. No one was moving. No one was applauding. The actor, as he looked out, saw what was happening. He could see in the eyes of many tears welling up, and the actor reveled in the moment. And then he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, do you see what just happened here? I knew the words to the psalm, but your pastor knows the shepherd, and that makes all of the difference. I know the words of the psalm, but your pastor knows the shepherd, And that makes all of the difference. As we gather here this evening on this Good Shepherd Sunday, in the midst of the joy of this Easter season, it is a reminder to us that it is not just enough to know the 23rd Psalm. It is not just enough to know that Jesus is our Good Shepherd, but like the old pastor, we are called to know intimately, personally, the Good Shepherd in our lives. And so this Sunday gives us an opportunity to step back and to be able to assess where it is that we are in our relationship with the living God. Are we just like the Shakespearean orator that simply know the words and know the general concepts? Or are we like that old pastor who have come to know in a very intimate and personal way of how God is our shepherd and how it is that he leads us to the fresh and green pastures, how it is that he gives us repose? And so as an Easter people, we are called to recognize how it is that we must know the shepherd, we must follow the shepherd, and we must listen to his gentle and loving voice. We recognize that in the midst of our world and our busy lives, there are many voices that come our way each day. But are we able to hear that gentle and loving voice of Jesus, who calls us by name, who shows us the pathway of life, who gives to us what we need to be able to sustain the joys and the sorrows, the blessings and the challenges of daily life and discipleship? How is it that we then hear that gentle and loving voice of the Good Shepherd in our lives? We recognize that like all human relationships, whether it is with our spouse or a best friend, if we do not take time to speak, but also to listen to that person, we will never know them fully, nor will we grow in intimacy with them. And so just as we spend time with our spouse or with our best friend, so too must we spend time each and every day with the Good Shepherd. It begins by making that commitment each and every day to spending a few moments in quiet prayer, not only us speaking to the shepherd, expressing to him our deepest needs, our joys, our sorrows, but then having the ability to sit in silence and listen to his voice, to guide us, to strengthen us, to affirm us, to direct us. And as we listen to his gentle and loving voice, not only do we begin to know him more fully, but then we are able then to respond to his invitation of how it is that we are to follow him day by day. That ability to be able to listen to the voice of the shepherd also happens as we spend time reflecting upon the word of God given to us and how God speaks to us through the scriptures, again to show us the pathway of life and to lead us to abundance of life. That ability to be able to listen to the gentle and loving voice of the Good Shepherd happens as we participate more fully and faithfully in the sacramental life of the church, especially that of the Eucharist and of reconciliation, that these become our lifelines to keep us connected in that intimate relationship with the Good Shepherd, to be able to feed and nourish us, and then to be able to give us that ability to receive the gift of his pardon and peace so that we can pick ourselves up again and continue to follow him. Our ability to be able to listen to the gentle and loving voice of the Good Shepherd happens when we are willing to be able to live the spiritual and the corporal works of mercy in our lives, being able to be that presence of Christ to those that we meet. And so, like the old pastor, we then are called to come to know, to follow, and to listen to the gentle voice of the Good Shepherd. But we recognize that it is not enough in our lives of faith and discipleship to just listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd and to follow him, as important as that is. But we also then in turn recognize that in and through our baptism and confirmation, then we in turn are called to be good shepherds for one another. We are called to be good shepherds to our spouse, to our children, to our families. We are called to be good shepherds to our friends and our neighbors. We are called to be good shepherds to those that we work with and recreate with. We are called to be good shepherds to those that we meet in the midst of our daily tasks. These are all opportunities for us to be able to reveal the gentle and loving presence of the Good Shepherd to them, so that one day they too might come to know, to love, and to serve the Lord. And so we are called to be living witnesses of the Good Shepherd. And this is in fact what we hear about in our first reading this evening from the Acts of the Apostles. We hear that Peter and the apostles are gathered on Pentecost Sunday. They are filled with the gifts of the Holy Spirit. They have come to know the Good Shepherd in their lives and now want to be shepherds to others. And we hear of Peter's bold proclamation of Jesus Christ and him crucified and risen from the dead to the crowds that are gathered there that day. And because of Peter's preaching and teaching, we hear at the end of our first reading this evening that 3,000 souls desired to become believers and were baptized that day. They had come to know the Good Shepherd in their lives because Peter was a good shepherd to them. If Peter had not announced the good news to them, would they have come to know, to love, and to serve the Lord in their lives? And so Peter, the apostles, the early church, the church throughout the centuries, has come to know that importance of being shepherds to one another. And the same is true for us today. Regardless of our age, our vocation, our way of life, all of us are called to be these good shepherds, and like Peter, to be able to share the good news with others. But to be able to share the good news with others does not mean that we have to get on our soapbox and stand on the corner of Pine and Third and quote the scriptures or the catechism of the Catholic Church to those that are there. But instead, like Peter, we are simply called to be able to give a testimony of our lives, of how Jesus, the Good Shepherd, has made a difference in our lives, in our families, of how he has given to us hope, strength, courage, direction. And as we share the witness of our lives with others, we hope that it will spark something within them so that they too might desire to follow the Good Shepherd in their lives. All of us know family members, friends that were perhaps once practicing their faith Sunday after Sunday with us, but for some reason, or perhaps moreover for no reason, they simply stopped in the practice of their faith. What would it be like if this week we made a conscious effort to reach out to them and to be able to invite them to come and join us this following Sunday, so that they too might be able to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd and come to know him once again. And so the challenge and invitation placed before us as an Easter people is to be people that hear the voice of the Good Shepherd in our lives, and then to be able to be good shepherds to one another. As we are able to do so, it will fill us with that same sense of peace and joy and newness of life that Peter and the apostles and the early church experienced. And then we will be able to be like the psalmist, to know that the Lord is our shepherd and that we shall not want. If we truly know the Good Shepherd in our lives, then we recognize that we will never be in need or want, that he will take care and protect us. And as he says at the end of our gospel tonight, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. Let us live in that newness and that abundance of life that comes from Jesus, the Good Shepherd.